Well, Jake Paul's attorney says he was out of state and not at his Calabasas home during that raid today. The FBI says they're investigating allegations of criminal acts. Today, YouTube star Jake is making headlines after an FBI raid at his home in Calabasas. Sky 5 was over the scene Wednesday morning as federal agents entered Paul's home in a gated community off Mulholland Highway. 24 feds, some in tactical gear, could be seen carrying evidence from the property, including several firearms. After the search, a SWAT team was seen leaving in a procession of law enforcement vehicles.
And yes, I can already hear the usual excuses: spectacle, showmanship, crossover appeal. But all of that fades the moment a true champion treats you like a warm-up. Because Joshua didn't cheer. He didn't boast. He appeared like a man simply completing a task he was far beyond qualified for. And that's frightening because it proves this fight was never truly competitive. Not on its best day. Not even if everything had perfectly aligned.
At any point, did you start to take your foot off the gas just a little bit because you noticed he was tiring out?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely a bit. You know, I wanted to give the fans a show, but I didn't want to hurt someone that didn't need to be hurt.
Did you carry Mike?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit. Yeah, like there was a point where, you know, I was just like, okay, he's not really engaging back. And so I don't know if he's tired or whatever. And I could just tell, you know, his age was showing a little bit. And I just have so much respect for him. And that like violence war thing between us, like after he slapped me, I wanted to, you know, be aggressive and take him down and knock him out and all that stuff. But that kind of went away as the rounds went on.
Now step back and watch how quickly everything spiraled. Within days, the atmosphere shifted, and within weeks, federal interests stopped being hypothetical. When agencies step in, it's never based on vibes, it's based on evidence. And the timing wasn't accidental. It was precise. I keep circling back to one question. Who knew what before the rest of us caught on? Because someone did. There's no way they didn't. What's most unsettling is how many voices suddenly went silent. Analysts, promoters, insiders who once couldn't stop talking. Because when the stakes rise, silence becomes deafening, and every missing detail feels deliberate. As if someone is stalling, burying documents, erasing call logs. I'm not naming names yet, but trust me, someone out there is sweating.
Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson was 100% scripted. Mike Tyson repeatedly bit his boxing gloves throughout the fight. When fights are scripted, fighters do weird gestures to signal that they're hurt. It's very possible Mike Tyson was biting on his glove to tell Jake Paul to calm down. Now, if that's not enough proof that this fight was scripted, in the middle of the fight, Mike Tyson is literally talking to Jake Paul while they are...
This is the moment where suspicion turns into a pattern. Once you line up the mismatched opponents, the strange behavior, the testing inconsistencies, and the Joshua result, it no longer feels like misfortune. It starts to look engineered. And when a design collapses, it does so violently. That's why this story doesn't stop at a single defeat. It spreads into investigations, damaged reputations, broken careers, and possibly more. If you think the raid was the finale, I don't. It felt like a comma, not a full stop. These stories never break all at once. They seep out, drip by drip, destroying people over time. And the most unsettling part is we still don't know who talked first, or who's about to. That uncertainty is what keeps me awake, because the truth always surfaces in the end.
That's definitely a crazy fight because of the weight differences. The weight difference in there, I only know one man that'll do the weight difference like that, and that's the Bronze Bomber. You know, for me, in my opinion, I think it's scripted a little bit because, you know, of the weight difference, and, you know, Joshua is a former, you know, champion. And also, you know, he's active, you know. I mean, this is going to be the first time that we see Paul, you know, fighting an active fighter. You know what I mean? We seen the Mike Tyson, that was all fun, that was cute, you know what I'm saying? It's fun and games and stuff, but now you're dealing with a real professional, you know.
So sit with that discomfort, because the division didn't just lose a sideshow. It received a warning. The sport just witnessed what happens when branding crashes headfirst into reality. And I don't believe this chapter is finished. Not even remotely. Something else is coming. I can feel it. And when it arrives, this will look like nothing more than a warm-up. It ends with a shattered jaw, federal agents forcing doors open, and a legacy bleeding out on a canvas that was never truly his. Now rewind for a moment. because if you blink, you miss how this whole thing exploded into disaster. This wasn't simply a defeat, it was an extinction-level event. And let me be clear, this story isn't slowing down. It's speeding up. It's evolving. It's turning ugly. And the people you assume are protected? They're not safe anymore.
Discussion, any agreement about, hey, you need to get the fight into this round, you need to carry him for X amount of rounds, you need to do your part to get it into the 5th, 6th, or whatever?
Absolutely no way ever. I mean, if you look at a couple of the right hands that AJ missed with in the first couple of rounds, like they would have done the same job on Jake's jaw if they would have landed. And Jake did very well to avoid them. So I always said going into the fight, AJ's not the kind of guy that's going to come out like a train, just start swinging away. He's going to take his time. And that's what he did. You know, the fight definitely went a few more rounds than anticipated from Anthony, but it's like, even now, it's like, yeah, it was definitely a fix. Some guy commented today on one of my posts, yeah, it was definitely a fix. I go, you do know that he's broken his jaw in 2 places.
Everyone keeps claiming this came out of nowhere, and that's a lie, a comfortable one. The warning signs had been screaming for years. And the moment Anthony Joshua folded Jake Paul like paper, the atmosphere shifted instantly. It was that stunned realization, this can't be real, because that punch didn't just put him down. It tore the mask off the entire operation. Suddenly, the whispers stopped being whispers. They became sirens. And if you think that knockout was the climax, you're already behind. Let me pull you back for a moment, because context matters here. 5 years ago, you would have laughed if someone suggested these fights felt suspicious. 6 months ago, you might have raised an eyebrow. But the instant Joshua refused to play along, the illusion collapsed. Real fighters don't pause for storylines. They don't shield brands. They don't wait for cues. And when that truth hit Jake Paul in round 5, the sport itself recoiled.
Jake Paul's California mansion has been raided by the FBI. Multiple news organizations report you can see in this aerial footage agents in uniform outside his home in Calabasas. Ernie told Reuters he would cooperate with the federal investigation.
What's gonna look like after his boxing career?
People think I do steroids and all this shit, so I have a plan because I think it's fucking bizarre. That's like the only excuse they can come up with is like rigged fights. Jake Paul does steroids. So after boxing, I'm gonna do a cycle of steroids to show people what Jake Paul on steroids actually looks like, because I want to shut people the fuck up.
Here's the part no one wants to confront. The betting, the money, the massive rivers of cash moving quietly behind the curtain. Because the moment gambling enters the picture, this stops being internet spectacle and becomes federal oxygen. And that's when everything goes silent, fast. You don't need a smoking gun when patterns start aligning. And believe me, someone in this story is lying, maybe more than one, and it's not the audience. You saw it too, even if you didn't want to admit it. The odd pacing. The awkward pauses. The moments that made you tilt your head and think, wait, what was that? Because boxing doesn't look like that when it's honest. And once leaked details began matching reality, round by round, the temperature rose sharply. Coincidence doesn't repeat itself with that level of precision. And yes, it sounds crazy, but crazy doesn't automatically mean wrong. There has never been public talk throughout Jake Paul's career suggesting his fights were anything other than legitimate professional contests. The same was said going into the Anthony Joshua fight. That's what makes it so mind-bending. Anthony Joshua had gone on record saying that if he didn't finish Jake Paul early, it would be disappointing, borderline a failure. As fight night approached, and especially afterward, the narrative shifted, and I understand why. Early on, they were confident it would take no more than 2 rounds to stop Jake Paul. Then Joshua walked in, not an influencer, not a nostalgia act, but a true heavyweight with real timing and real consequences. The entire ecosystem Jake built relied on one thing, cooperation. And Joshua didn't cooperate. He studied. He waited. And then he erased him. That right hand wasn't just impact, it was a system snapping. You could feel it through the screen. People keep asking why this fight mattered more than the others. Here's the answer. This one couldn't be controlled the same way. The risk was too high, and the money was too loud. Once the bell rang, the outcome stopped being negotiable. And when Jake Paul's jaw fractured in 2 places, that wasn't symbolism. It was biology testifying under oath. No PR team can spin broken bones. Some tried to soften it afterward, pointing out that Jake lasted 6 rounds with AJ, framing it as an achievement since many expected it to end in 2. Others noted conditioning, observing that Joshua looked far better prepared, while Jake Paul burned energy circling the ring, something that punishes fighters who aren't accustomed to it. But don't miss the crucial part, because this is where things get slippery. The response wasn't humility. It was lawyers, threats, and deflection. That always happens when a narrative fractures. If everything were clean, there'd be no need to bully people into silence. You'd let the truth breathe. Instead, everything tightened. And when things tighten, it means pressure is building somewhere out of sight. Here's the uncomfortable question no one likes but everyone needs to hear. If you're clean, why resist stricter testing? Why avoid higher standards if you're legitimate? Fighters who know who they are don't fear scrutiny. Even the physical transformation raised red flags, things trainers whisper privately but avoid saying on camera because access is currency in this business. I won't pretend to know who knew what, but controversy has a way of pulling everyone nearby into its gravity, whether they deserve it or not. The tragedy is that boxing never needed this circus to survive. It welcomed it because the money was tempting, and now everyone involved has to live with the consequences. Jake Paul is intelligent, no doubt, but intelligence without respect for the sport only carries you so far. Joshua showed exactly where that road ends. And I'm certain of one thing, this story isn't finished. When money, ego, and legitimacy collide, the fallout always outlasts the fight itself. As a fan and someone who's followed combat sports for decades, when Anthony Joshua knocked out Jake Paul, I didn't feel excitement, I felt confirmation. Deep down, many of us already knew Jake was playing a role, not building a real fighting career. Joshua, intentionally or not, exposed that simply by being himself, a genuine heavyweight with real instincts and zero interest in protecting anyone's YouTube storyline. And when Eddie Hearn went on interviews referencing investigations as if mentioning them alone proved innocence, it rang hollow. Seasoned promoters don't speak that way unless they understand how serious accusations could become. And Hearn knows the difference between internet noise and something that can drag an entire business into very uncomfortable rooms with very uncomfortable questions. Internet noise and something that could drag his entire business into uncomfortable rooms with uncomfortable questions. Jake Paul always claimed he was changing boxing, but what he truly changed was the audience. He brought in people who didn't understand the rhythm of a real fight, and that worked, until it didn't. Once someone like Joshua steps in, the contrast is brutal. Suddenly, casual fans start noticing what purists had been warning about all along. I keep thinking about Mike Tyson in that fight and how unsettling it felt to watch a legend move the way he did. Whether it was age, agreement, or something else, it didn't look like real competition. And if you care about the sport, that leaves a bitter taste. Especially when Jake framed it as proof of legitimacy, when in reality it was a nostalgia-driven spectacle. Logan Paul being visibly shaken after the raid is also significant, because brothers share more than branding, they share information. And when federal agents show up, bravado vanishes quickly. All the online confidence doesn't matter when lawyers start speaking in lowered tones. The situation with Nikisa Bedarian and MVP issuing threats feels defensive rather than confident. If everything were clean, the facts would suffice. Leaning on defamation language signals fear of narrative, not trust in truth. I don't believe Jake Paul is inherently evil or a criminal mastermind. He's a product of an era that values attention over authenticity. But boxing is unforgiving, and eventually the sport demands payment, something Anthony Joshua collected with interest. What struck me most was Joshua's post-fight demeanor. No trash talk. No chasing clout. Just work. And that's when it became clear, for him, this was never a storyline. It was simply another night. That contrast alone explains why Jake never belonged at that level. The discussion didn't appear out of nowhere. Anyone who has trained seriously knows how rare it is to gain massive size while maintaining speed, especially in your mid to late 20s. When John Fury raised concerns about VA testing, it wasn't random paranoia. It was a boxing family recognizing familiar red flags. I've watched Paulie Malignaggi analyze fights for years. When he questions opponent selection and career trajectory, I listen because fighters can tell when someone is being guided rather than tested honestly. The Joshua Law should have been a humbling reset for Jake Paul, a moment to admit, "I've hit my ceiling." Instead, the response was panic. And panic attracts attention from the wrong people, especially when gambling money and international sports books are involved. Crossing that line turns the issue from punches and personalities into fraud, a realm where YouTube fame means nothing. I keep thinking back to December 19th. That night didn't just alter Jake's career, it changed how every future influencer boxing match will be perceived. Precedent, suspicion, and scrutiny now exist where none did before. Anthony Joshua may not have intended to end anything, but by fighting honestly, he forced honesty into the conversation. That's something the influencer boxing space has long avoided. If Jake Paul returns, it won't be the same. The aura is gone, the benefit of the doubt evaporated, and every move will be analyzed through the skeptical lens he created. Watching this unfold, part of me feels disappointment more than anger. There was an opportunity to genuinely bridge audiences, but shortcuts were taken, and the sport was cheapened. The FBI raid, regardless of legal outcome, is a permanent scar. Even if nothing comes of it in court, culturally it changes perception, and perception is everything in combat sports.